This episode brought to you by How to Write Manga, your complete guide to the secrets of Japanese comic book storytelling. Available wherever fine ebooks are sold.
The world has gone insane. Cosplayers rule the conventions. Gamers dominate the tabletop and the internet. Sci-fi subjugates the movies, and fantasy rules the bookstore with an iron fist. Only one group can bring order to this unruly mob. A team of uber geeks, masters of the nerdly arts, trained for decades in the hobby shops and basements of the nation. Mobilized by the secret masters, they are the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
Hello, operatives, and welcome to the Department of Nerdly Affairs. I'm your host, Rob Patterson, here with my co-host, Don Chisholm.
Yep.
And tonight, we are very fortunate. We have been joined by none other than Kimlin Tran, a voice actor with experience in many different areas who's going to tell us all about voice acting. So, welcome to the show, Kimlin.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. Well, thanks for coming on. Why don't we actually start with your background? So, what made you get into voice acting?
Let's see. Well, I do know that at first I wanted to be a writer, but what happened was that we were doing a job exploration course at my high school, where we get to explore different kind of occupations about what to do for the rest of our lives. And the thing is that they pretty much made this course so you can actually job shadow people, interview people in the field, get a feel for what they're actually doing, so you can see, oh, is this really for me? Or, oh, this really isn't for me. For me, I thought I was going to be a writer anyway, so I decided to explore voice acting because, well, I've always been that one person in class who actually got really into reading during literature and English. Oh, okay, make it more like a performance. And I decided to do the voice acting thing because I was just very curious about it. And when I job shadowed this voice actor, I learned that voice acting wasn't just a matter of, oh, only extroverted actors can be actors. It turns out there's a process to it. There's a lot of technical issues that have to be figured out. And it's a very collaborative, creative process. And I figured, you know what, this is actually very interesting. I actually want to give this a try. This is something that interests me a lot. Lots of problem solving. And yeah.
So did you actually get to shadow a voice actor?
Yeah, I got to shadow one or two of them, actually. I got to sit in on two recording sessions for different actors. And I got to watch them record for some anime. And the way they went about it was that, well, it's sort of like they have each line coming in. They didn't get to prepare for any of it. And it's sort of like they had to act with what they had. And there was a lot of things like, oh, the director needed the take to be in this way to communicate this message across. And even though what the actor provided worked in the moment, the thing is that what didn't really contribute to the story. So it's very collaborative, and they had to work out, oh, okay, it wasn't a matter of taking things personally. To them, it was just a matter of like, okay, we're going to solve this problem together. We're going to make these characters come to life.
I can see why that would be really attractive. I mean, you're taking a fictional character and literally bringing them to life, and it's all in your voice.
Yeah.
No, that's impressive. So, wow, okay, so just watching this made you want to become a voice actor.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you go about it then? I mean, once you had your dream, what did you do to make it real?
I know what happened was that after I job shadowed my second voice actor, the studio that made the job shadowing possible was that they said, you know what, maybe why don't you get to see what the process is like behind the microphone itself. So they let me do one or two Walla sessions. Well, Walla stands for With All Actors. So basically all the background stuff, so you can have a whole bed of sound in the background, so it actually sounds more organic, like people actually talking. And I had to follow the directions the best I could. Actually, endure what a 3 to 4 hour session feels like with all that screaming and yelling. And then it's sort of like, it was really draining and tiresome, but it felt fun at the same time because, again, it's that problem solving thing. Like, you have to match the flaps. You had to get the intention across instead of just making it sound like you're just repeating words off the script. And so the first thing I ever recorded was for Tweeny Witches, which is an anime done by Studio 4 Degree C. Yeah.
Yes,
and
was. Yep.
yeah, and that was a really long time ago. And after I got home, it's sort of like, what else can I do? You can't just wait for them to keep calling me in. I had to keep practicing. So I auditioned for a lot of projects on the voice acting club, and I managed to get cast in a bunch of Flash animations. And the first Flash animation I recorded for, my setup was so bad that they animated a cup over my character's mouth. And since then I had to upscale my recording setup at least a little bit. Instead of recording onto a camera and extracting the audio from the camera and sending that in. So that was bad.
Wow.
I mean,
that is pretty bad.
Yeah, you have to practice with whatever you can get, but at the same time, if you want to be in something that isn't a complete polished product, what you have has to sound pretty polished, or at least as polished as they can get to before they edit it.
So do you actually have your own home recording studio now? Like, do you have actual rooms set up or anything like that?
Not yet. I do not have the room in my room because I live in a very cluttered room. But I do have a desk set up with my own Neumann microphone right here inside a little foam box. I might upgrade from mattress foam to acoustic foam sometime.
Right.
I think I can afford
all
it.
that clutter absorbs the sound, right? It acts as natural acoustic foam.
Sometimes I wonder about that. Maybe it's not exactly as nice and clean as pillow fort technology or closet space technology, but it's basically like as one person put it, like, oh look, it's kind of like a cluttered baggage claim technology, I guess, because it's filled with all this like. Though I guess the sound would probably bounce off the book, so that might not be very great. So it was just sort of like, oh, all these hard surfaces, that's not going to be very good. But you know what? That coat rack behind the microphone might do something if it passes right through the mattress foam.
Well, yeah, there is that. Definitely. So did the voice acting club then lead you to more professional roles? How did that work?
Since I was occasionally called in to record for anime at Bang Zoom Entertainment, that was some of my early professional stuff. Then for the voice acting club, I worked up my body of work, so I got a lot of practice and I got recommended to different things by recording for a lot of original projects as much as I could because, well, think of it this way. If I got cast in a whole bunch of fan dubs, I'll only be compared to the people who are actually working on the actual dubs. So I couldn't really exactly call those performances mine. And the stretch that I can do when I was recording for parodies is basically, it's kind of like Monty Python or Robot Chicken, where people understand that this is a parody, and the fact that it's a derivative work is what makes my performance my own. But it's still not quite the same, so I try to go for different original projects as I could. So I went for audio plays, indie games, student projects. And eventually, some of these indie games grew and became bigger projects. Alternatively, I do know that since I was building a body of work and letting people know that I was practicing my craft and doing whatever I could, some people kept me in mind for when they were casting for bigger projects like Skullgirls or Dust and Elysian Tale. So those are the bigger projects I ended up being cast on because I practiced so darn much and because I showed that I can do this.
Okay. Well, how long did it take? Because Dust and Elysian Tale is a pretty big game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a pretty dang game. It is a pretty big game. I think at this point it's sold roughly 2 to 3 million copies by now. So it's gone platinum.
Yeah.
And let's see. I started voice acting in 2008. Dust got released around 2012. So I do know that I recorded for Dust around 2011. So giving it some perspective, it took me roughly 3 years of me working and training to get the opportunity and then nail it. So in a way, it took me 3 years to get that role. Just like how it took me two to 3 years to get the role of Miss Fortune in Skullgirls. So,
Right.
I mean, when you really think about it, every single actor, it took them years to get the role that they're getting at the moment because
Right.
what where they're cast for is all their experience, not so much as their just their voice.
So a 3-year overnight success.
Yeah, 3-year-old overnight. It's funny how I've heard that the average to be successful is 10 year. That's for an overnight success.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I'm working on year 8 right now. And the thing is that I'm still not necessarily a success because it's sort of like, on one end, I am working regularly as a voice talent. I am getting paid, but at the same time, it's not enough to live off of. Though I will say
Right.
that it's not to say that everyone is experiencing the same thing, since I do know some peers of mine who are living very, very well off of their voice work because they work so darn hard and never stopped. Like, they get lots of residuals from working on commercials and different national campaigns, for instance, and they just kept working and working and working.
Right.
Right.
Now, do you have an agent?
Actually not yet, because an agent wouldn't be able to take me in without a commercial demo, because commercials, those are the bread and butter. They make more money because there are more commercials out there than video games and animation. Now, I mostly specialize in character work at the moment, but I have been practicing with my commercials as much as I could. It's just that it's not yet at a level that I think is satisfactory enough to get a proper demo. So I still need to keep practicing and working in that pen mileage. If there was, well, in drawing is pen mileage, because all the mistakes you make is experience. Everything you do good and bad, that's experience. I'm still working up my experience till I think, yeah, this is good. And I get more peers that actually say, yeah, I'm going to affirm that this is good. Yeah, I think you're competitive. I was about to say I did get cast in several commercials and ad campaigns, but it's sort of like they didn't make it to the final cut because, well, it's a creative process that some things change. Some people want different sounds to certain things, and well, that is just the creative process, and that's just how it goes. No different from working on the anime and realizing, you know what, that take is great, but we can't use it, so that's the creative process.
As long as you still get paid.
Yep. I mean, you're getting paid for the work that you're putting in, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter. It's nice if it gets on the air, but the money is the more important part.
Okay. Yeah. The thing is that I will say that it would be really nice to get on air, but you got to do what you got to do, and you're like, okay, well, I guess having the rent until the next commercial or the next audition to come in or the next casting would be important. It's good to not starve.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Right, on your turn.
Okay. Well, I was going to wonder because you've mentioned getting jobs and that. I've noticed for a lot, especially for the animation, you tend to hear the same people over and over. Now, is that by design or is that just kind of some weird circumstance that comes up?
Well, this is a really fascinating one because on one end, everybody... these aren't done by just one studio. Oftentimes they're done by different casting directors, different studios, and sort of like it's not so much as they're all collaborating together and saying, yeah, let's put this voice actor in the leads of every single thing we're working on. Sometimes it's just on accident. Like, for instance, it's sort of like everyone is going for the certain archetype. And then for some reason, certain actors embody this archetype so darn well that they become the voice for these characters. But the thing is that sometimes I've heard from them that sometimes they have to worry about the possibility of being oversaturated. Because when that happens, sometimes they go 1 or 2 years of being like, crap, now they can't employ me because they're afraid of me being overused. What do I do? So it's kind of a worry for them too. So pros and cons. It's kind of like feast famine kind of thing for voice actors.
Right.
And
Right.
on one end, it's sort of like some people worry that, oh, they're only cast because they're popular. But, well, I would say that they would have to be good, or they had to have done something right to be cast. Like they had to have networked really well. They had to have basically all that experience behind them, the right acting choices. something unique that they bring to their performance aside from their voice, because there have been times I've been told that when I was auditioning for Fidget, I was told that everyone else used the same voice as I did. So everybody had the same Fidget voice. But the only thing that made us different was very different incremental qualitative aspects to our performances. Like some of us had more perk to our performances. Some of them had a little more subdued approach to it. Very subtle things that was kind of like comparing like teeny tiny differences in gradients, for instance. Kind of like, great, all of these are different shades of gray, maybe even 50 shades. And then we had to figure out which one is the right shade that will actually match with the windows or something like that. So it's really, whoa. So it's very fascinating stuff. That
I bet. Wow. Obviously, you've thought about this a lot.
Yeah, I have done casting for some video games, like for Adult Swim games and for Sony, and it did come down with sort of like, you know what, I want to hear some new talents, and I'm open to hearing new talents, and at the same time, it's like, you know what, I like working with this talent again and again because they always offer something new and interesting that I would like to share with the world, and it's sort of like. It's an interesting mix of like, you know what? These are new talents. They bring something new to the table, and at the same time, I haven't worked with them before, so I don't know if I am comfortable working with them yet. But at the same time, there's the first for everything. The people they worked with forever were new at some time for them. So
did actually working as on the other side of the mic and in the director or producer role, did that actually change the way you perform yourself?
Only a little bit, because it's sort of like I realized that, as an actor, I had to keep in mind that different projects ask for different things. Like realizing that, when I was recording for Skullgirls, for instance, I realized that, okay, I can't just take forever with these lines. These are short and quick, because there have been one or two lines I've recorded for Skullgirls that went on for too long that it's only within moments that the character gets punched in the face while they're talking and it just cuts off the line. So I had to keep in mind that, okay, so we have to remember what that these lines have to be short and quick and to the punch, so to speak. Right, and yeah, I had to keep that in mind when I was casting for Rainstorm Rivals, because it's sort of like we had to keep this short, quick. We can't, even though your one-liners are really awesome, it goes on for way too long. And some of the death noises, great, but not too long, because it's kind of like, well, you're just fainting and dying instead of like going on. So nothing extravagant.
Wow, so death noises are an actual skill in your profession.
It's sort of like, I do know that there are lots of times where we ask for different kind of death noises, but the thing is sort of like, it depends on what the game is capable of portraying or what they're asking for. Like, are you burning to death, or are you falling, or are you just, where are you getting destroyed? Your head or your chest? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, okay, are you dying from poisonous gas, for instance, or are you dying from something bursting out of you? So it's lots of like you have to have a good sense of the physicality or control over what parts of your body do what. It's kind of like part of your instrument.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. Now, when you're recording, do you actually like jump up around the room? How active physically are you when you're recording?
Well, usually I sit down, which is not ideal. It would be nice to stand up, but at the same time, there's a difference between just saying, go over there, and pointing your finger and going, go over there, because it's sort of like you can feel it. There's a slight tension as you adjust your chest, for instance. So doing hand motions actually help a lot, as long as you're not hitting the microphone. And that would be bad. If you... Like, for instance, just stretching just makes such a big difference to just saying, oh, that makes a big difference. There's a lot of physicality to this. And if you can, try not to wear anything that would make too much noise. Because I've heard a story of one voice actor that had squeaky clothes So he had to take off his shirt during a session to record, so that was a little awkward. So no jingle jangly jewelry, and nothing that is squeaky when you breathe.
Well, do you have a pre-voicing prep that you do? Do you have some ritual or something you do before you do your recording sessions?
Let's see. It depends. For me, I don't do it too much, but I do a little bit of a warm-up if something demands a lot of screaming. So I would have to try to make sure that I am really hydrated, for instance. I would have to make sure that I'm actually well-fed, because I have been to some sessions without eating because I got too excited and I didn't want to, feel too bloated. Because there's some times where I've recorded and I had too much food in me, so I couldn't get enough air into me to yell. But so there are times I forgot to eat, and then instead my stomach will be growling during the session, ruining takes. So that's not good. That's not good at all.
Very bad.
As much as I can, to warm up, I try to read everything out loud as much as I could. So when I'm driving, to a session, I would be reading all the signs out loud. Just read.
Have you actually ever had your voice just give out on you?
I have it got sore, but it's sort of like I try to rest it just for a little bit. I haven't had it give out completely yet. Not yet, though I've heard lots of scary stories about that, and it's like, oh wow, I do not want to be in your shoes, because for them, they have another session the next day or something, and they have to reschedule it.
Huh. I gotta say, I'm kind of fascinated by your discussion about things like the death noises and the injuries and that. Because that's something, first off, that nobody thinks about. And it reminds me of that Simpsons episode where they're filming Itchy and Scratchy. Okay, he's got a rusty chainsaw. No, rustier. Now, does things like that actually happen?
A little bit, yeah. Because it's sort of like when you think about something... for that example, it's sort of okay, rustier, that means it's kind of maybe a little more dull. So that means it's probably going to be much more painful. It's more having a harder time working into you. So I'm trying to think of some examples. I did record for a military game earlier. I had to guess what kind of injuries these, that I had to do for the death noises, because I wanted to give a variety instead of just getting shot or getting blown up. I had to look through the files and see, okay, those are the names of all the aliens or monsters that are going to kill me. So you have something like the extractor, and I'm just oh, extractor, that means they're going to take something out of me. So I had to just imagine that I'm getting eviscerated in different ways. And, or you have something not bloater, but I can't remember the name of the monster because it might be a placeholder name, but it's something something that explodes, or think Boomer from the Left 4 Dead games. And I'm oh, okay, so it's something that explodes or something that just vomits stuff on you. So think acid vomit. So things are so your skin's melting and you have to feel these things just ripping away at your face. It's just really awful things happening to you for video games.
Wow.
And
don't you ever worry that someday you're actually going to need help? You're going to be recording and you're actually going to need help, and your family aren't going to come because they're all going to think, oh, she's just recording lines?
I worry about that sometimes too, actually, because because it's sort of I think my sister told me that she can hear the difference between me acting and me actually being scared. She told me that one time, and I was all oh, dang it, that means I have to up my game to not sound like I'm acting. But then at the same time, it's kind of Tammy, get in my room, there's a spider, get in the room. And it sounds really frantic. And it's sort of she just doesn't come because I'm no, there's a spider, come in, please. And I have to use my cell phone to call her up.
Okay.
So though I will say that I have heard a story about Elysian Dodge, who is my co-star in Dust. He's there has been a time when he was recording for a project and sounding like he was dying, and someone did call 911 on him. So I don't know. It may be a mix between my family being she's acting, and people going, oh no, that's not acting, we're calling the cops.
Right.
That's why you need a safe word.
Oh yeah, that's true. Safe word. You need a safe word. That's right.
Yeah, I need a safe word.
No duff is good.
No duff?
No duff.
No
yeah,
duff.
it's a military. Yeah, you use it when in the military on exercise. If somebody's actually injured rather than simulated, that's the term.
No
Ooh.
duff. Okay,
No
that's
duff.
good to know.
Huh, who knew? Okay, so we're no duff beer. No duff.
Exactly, no duff beer. What is it an acronym? What does it stand for?
I've never met anybody who actually knows where that word came from.
Okay.
Whoa.
Probably
might-
The Simpsons.
Yeah, The Simpsons, everything is because of that. It's probably like there was some guy back in the Civil War that he was like Corporal No Duff, and he was always like pulling the fake injury thing to get out of like parade, and then one day he got eaten by a wolf, and then that was in honor of that. They decided to use that as the term for somebody actually got hurt.
Oh, so it's like what we call prostitutes hookers.
Okay.
That's the legend anyway, I once heard, is that we called them hookers because there was actually either a general or a commander in the Civil War who was very named Hooker, who was actually very fond of female companionship of the night. So that became a slang term during the Civil War to describe prostitutes. So that's why they called them hookers.
Huh.
That's a version I heard. I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's just one of those stories. But yeah, it's just one of those weird military things.
We learned things today.
Well, I am a teacher. God help me.
And now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Oh, she gave the correct response. Oh, I love you, Kimlin. All right, so speaking of that, so you worked on videos and you worked on video games. Which is harder?
Because they ask for different things, so it's hard to tell. It's like comparing, okay, which one's harder? Let's see, getting juice from a lemon or from an orange. And it's kind of like, I don't know. Yeah. So
Do you have one you prefer to record? Like, do you prefer video games? Are they easier to record, or they, videos are?
let's see. Well, recording for anime is a lot of fun. That's because I usually get to go into the studio for that. For video games,
Right.
it's the same way. It's a lot more freeing for video games because you don't necessarily have to match to pictures as much, unless they really ask you to for cutscenes.
Right.
I think the closest, I haven't done this one yet, but I have studied it about when you record for video games that were originally in Japanese, for instance, and you have to do echo repeat, which is a lot like ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. Is that the right word? Dang it. It's a lot for
ADR's automatic dialogue replacement. Yes.
Yes, I did it. Okay. Woo.
Congratulations.
Yay. Good job, me. It's a lot like recording for anime in that you have to match the sound file, but you only get to hear it, so you don't have a visual cue as much. So I haven't done that so much, but I'm familiar with it. That one sounds a little complicated, but I think, well, as long as you have the director as your guide, you can help figure out the problems, such as, hey, you need to speed this line up, and you have to find out the emotional reason why you are speeding this line up instead of just doing it physically. Such as, there's a difference between, like, you know what? You need to slow this line down, but you're angry. So you're thinking, okay, you're trying to slow down because you want to let the listener know that you mean every word you say. You need to speed that up. You're trying to attack the person with your words, so you need to speed up. So it's okay. So that's stuff like that. For video games, I think it's a lot more free for me. So it's kind of like, okay, there's not, it's sort of like I get as much time as I would like to record this and that.
But don't you have to record the same line over and over and over again for video games? I mean, there's not just a story where you're going through a scene. You just have to record that one line again and again, don't you?
Well, it's no different than recording for anime and for animations and so on. You have to do the line over and over until you get the one that works best.
Okay. So you don't record by scene then for anime or for videos. You record just by line?
Pretty much. It's in a way, it's a little bit by scene, but it's kind of like it is by line by line. I know for Dust, for instance, we know that this cutscene is one whole scene, and we had to do one line over and over, and then we would just do it over and over until we complete the scene. Sometimes we would try to do one whole read through to get a more organic feel for it. or we just go through the whole thing in one go, and then we adjust individual parts, or we get a good feel for how the scene is supposed to go, then redo the whole thing again in one go. It really is up to the director and how they would like to get the performance out of the actors.
Now, when you've been doing studio work, are you usually alone in the studio, or is there other people there with you? I mean, literally in the recording room.
It depends on the project. Like for in Skullgirls, I recorded by myself for all of my roles, like Miss Fortune and Robo Fortune. And in most anime things I've recorded for, when I recorded Walla, I usually recorded with a group of other people, so we can get a whole group of people. So it's kind of like, oh, we need a room filled with 50 people. Okay, so 5 people record 5 loops or 5 versions, so that's like 50 people. It's a lot easier with a group of people than just one person, which I've heard is actually done, because one time I did record for an anime that's coming up, but I'm not sure if I can talk about it yet. I actually had to record incidentals and Walla with another person with me. And we basically, it was the most fascinating thing ever, because I just came into the room early for my session, and I just saw there was another group of people doing the same scene. So we were layering multiple groups of people, and then me and my co-worker recording for another group of people, and I think they were layering multiple people and multiple groups into one scene. So that was interesting. I do know that when we were recording incidentals together, like people who are like, aside from just doing Walla, actual people who are in the scenes, like, oh, hello neighbor, hello, the people you'll never see again, usually. And we actually worked off of each other, because we were multiple incidentals in the same scene, like, oh, 2 girls who are talking smack about the main character here, and they're just talking to each other. So we got a more organic feel instead of just going in one at a time, like when I did incidentals for K-On! So...
Okay. Interesting. So, when you're doing the videos, you've mostly done anime, so you're watching the actual scene on a monitor while you're recording?
Yeah, and it's usually on a screen, and then they would just play the preview for us, so we can get a feel for what the scene is about, what's going on, listen to the director's note, and then we just go. They just cue us in with beeps, 1, 2, 3, and then we go on the 4th imaginary beep, like 1, 2, 3, go. And then we just go through the scene, and we just work off each other the best we can. I will say it is trickier when we are doing the incidentals working off each other, because we only had one set of beeps, and we both had to match the flaps without getting cued in as much, too. So it's kind of like, we had one set of beeps, and then I have to watch my co-star go off of that beep, then I have to match the flap as my character's mouth opens and perform the script from there, and we just work off of each other. So that one's tricky.
That must be really tricky. That must be a hard skill to match the flaps like that.
So usually the writers do a good job of having the flaps match the writing, or the writing match the flaps, rather. And thank goodness for good writers. And if something is off, like we speak a little faster than usual, or we're actually getting more words in because, well, that's what the scene calls for, the director and sometimes the actor would have to make adjustments to the script, and there are alternate reads to the lines too that we can perform instead.
Right. Are you ever allowed to just improv?
Usually for Walla, yes, because there's so much going on in the background that we just make things up. So as long as we're not saying anything that would get the studio or the show in trouble, like we can't say any name brand products like Kleenex or Q-tips. You have to say something like cotton swab or napkin instead. And we can't say anything religious. And I know profanity is kind of an iffy one, depends on the show. And we get to say random stuff like, oh, okay, the scene calls for you being shocked and amazed with this performer. And 1, 2, 3, go. And I have to come up with something as fast as I can. And we have to keep talking as much as we can until the end of the scene. Or not the end of the scene, but the end of the loop.
Right.
Wow.
Have you ever been tempted to try to sneak anything into Walla?
Oh, yes. I've been so sneaky. I'm trying to imagine... let's see. I'm trying to imagine any good ones. because I know some friends of mine who snuck in like a whole backstory about these two people who keep showing up throughout this one show, talking about how basically there's this one episode had to do with a sports game, and the thing is they were just talking back and forth about sports terms that make no sense, that have nothing to do with baseball, and they're just like, oh, I guess you're talking about that now. So they stuck in a whole story between these two people who have no idea how to play baseball. And I'm not sure if it's in the final cut. I would have to check, but the director didn't stop them, so I guess it's in the script. I guess it's recorded.
Wow. Yeah, once it's there, yeah.
Now, have you ever had anything go like full old school Speed Racer on you, where everything is just out of sync and the lines don't fit, and it ends up being unintentionally Mystery Science Theater material?
I'm trying to think, because I think like when everything doesn't fit and everything is just all kinds of crazy. Because usually we've come so far from that it's kind of like, okay, everything matches in everything. But man, what I would give to work on a gag dub where everything is just made just to make fun of everything. Because the closest thing to me working on a gag dub would probably be 14 4 Stars Dragon Ball Z Abridged, but that's a parody, and we don't match flap in that one. We record it kind of like prelay because they're gonna adjust the flaps to match us, and they actually hired animators for extra mouth shapes now. So
wow.
Yeah, but that's only for Team 4 Star, and that's a parody. So I'm not. I want to work on a gag dub so badly. They sound like they're having so much fun.
Well, if anyone out there is working on a gag dub, you know who to call.
Yes.
And if the Ghostbusters don't work, you can call Kimlin.
Yes.
Okay, so Kimlin, I have a question then. Has Community played a role in your success so far? Like, have you found that you really benefited from being part of the voice acting community?
Yes, I would say, because it's sort of like I said from the beginning, that most people who were in charge of the bigger projects, they kept me in mind because of what I was able to work relatively consistently, and they were able to hear me act and know what choices I tend to make as a performer. And for instance, I was very active on the voice acting club, and Devin Mack was casting for us, and he knew that I auditioned and worked on a lot of projects from the voice acting club, so he had me audition for Fidget and a whole bunch of other characters, but Fidget was the one I got.
Okay.
Let's see. And I think Christina heard me work pretty much all over the place, so that's how she kept me in mind for that, for Skullgirls.
Right. Okay, so some of these people that you're meeting through the voice acting club and other places, they've gone on to become part of the industry, and they remember you, so they help to get you jobs, basically.
Yeah, and it's sort of like when I worked in certain communities, like, say, for Newgrounds, a whole bunch of animators who shared all their works on Newgrounds have gone on to do bigger things out there, and they kept me in mind. Like, I do know, like, I followed a whole bunch of people on DeviantArt, for instance, and some people, they ask for not voice talents, but I do know, like, for instance, for Kagemono, which is a student film, the animator was asking for what should I do to get better characterizations out of these sound audio clips for these foxes. And I said, well, D. Bradley Baker, and Frank Welker, the reason why they're called in to do the voices for, like, Perry the Platypus, or for Flit, or for Miko, or for Abu, is because they needed more specific acting choices for these characters that are a bit anthropomorphized with these more human characteristics, which is kind of like the sounds are still animal, but the personality is more human. And so I pretty much offered my services to Sabrina, and after working with her, she has gone on to work on Gravity Falls and Star Butterfly versus the Forces of Evil, or something like that.
Star versus the Forces of Evil.
Star versus
awesome
the Forces of Evil. Yes, and she's gone on to work on those shows. So you just never know who you're going to work with. You just have to keep working with people, because some people are just starting out and, well, they're just going to keep going.
Yeah, and you never know where they're going to end up, so you should definitely treat everyone with respect.
Right. As much as you can.
Now, do you find that when you're doing a voice for specific characters, do you get a lot of say in that character, or do you find a lot of that is given to you at the beginning?
Most of the time it's given to me at the beginning. Very rarely do I have a say over what the character is going to be like. I know in the case of Robo Fortune, I did get a say on what she would be like, but I trusted Lab Zero so much that I let them write the script for Robo Fortune and incorporate her into the lore of Skullgirls. Because they did ask, okay, what kind of stuff would she say? And I just came up with some choice puns for her. And then it's sort of like, they were all like thinking about what kind of relationships would she have with these characters. And I said, I think she would be a bit like this. And then they just wrote the scripts. And I said, yep, I approve of these scripts. This is what she would be like. But it's not always like that for certain characters or certain shows, because it's often expensive to write in new lines for video games, for instance. Because I was told for Fidget that I was recording some really wackadoo noises for Fidget, and they decided to keep that line in the game itself. I didn't know that even though that Dean was making the majority of the game himself, it still costs money to hire the transcriber to type in so they actually had to add that line to the game and change everything just to type in all that crazy mess of things.
Okay.
That sounds like a nightmare job. How do you spell? Try it with a Q. I don't know.
But they did type it out though. Lots of Z's and X's and O's and E's and W's. SH
and possibly drinking.
Probably they were like, oh no, I have to type this one out. Okay.
So, going back to the community thing, do you have to live in Los Angeles to be a voice actor? I mean, I know you're California based. I think you're in LA, right?
I commute to LA, but I am based in Southern California. I will say that for more remote works, you can right now, there's a lot you can do from home, surprisingly enough. Right. Like, for instance, like Heroes of New Earth is recorded remotely. And I recorded pretty much all 4 of my characters from home. But for something like Skullgirls, where they ask for an LA cast, I basically had to be in Southern California for that. For Juden, which was announced a while ago, I had to be in New York for that one. But that was me just being in the area, and I was fortunate enough for them to let me come in and record for that. But for Texas stuff, like for Funimation, I would have to be part of the talent pool there and be able to go to Texas to record for those anime.
Right. Because I know from the scriptwriter side of things, I know from a couple professional scriptwriters that they talk about how you pretty much have to live in LA. And it's not because you can't send your script in, it's because the way you're going to get work is by actually talking with other human beings, i.e. other scriptwriters and producers and everyone else in LA. You have to be at least available physically in that area, because that's how you're going to get work. And that's how you're going to meet people and make the connections.
That sounds about right, because it's sort of like I think one disadvantage I have for living so far away from, say, Burbank or LA is that I'm not really close enough to a lot of my peers who are like going to each other's improv showcases, for instance. So you can actually see people work, or you see other people who are performing. And being able to say, hey, look, I saw your performance. It would be nice to, sit down, have some coffee, and talk about what you've been up to.
Makes sense. I mean, yeah, you can't really spend time with them and get to know them, and that's a lot of ways you're going to get work, is through those connections. Mm-hmm.
Which is why I'm able to do a lot of the remote stuff, because I can hang out on Facebook, and we've shared things like, hey, check out this kitty cat video. And they said, haha, that's really funny. I mean, I was able to get a working relationship as a casting director for Super Flash Bros. Because I made ghost noises on my Facebook. And not, like, typed it out. I typed out ghost noises, and they just thought, you know what? Kimlin, you are a fan of that ghost game, right? Right? we can't use the stock audio for this game for the commercial version anymore, so would you be happy to record for us? Okay. And I record for it, and they said, you know what, we would like the rest of the cast filled in. Do you know any actors? I can cast for you. Oh, we like this cast. Can you cast for this other game? I guess I have another job now. So I can make that kind of relationship online, but in person, it would be more ideal to say, hang out with people in person and get to see how they work, and so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely see that. Plus, it would just be cool to hang out with some of those professional LA voice actors as well, I imagine.
Yeah, that would be so cool, even though they'd be doing really crazy stuff like going to Burning Man.
You can go to Burning Man if you want.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of the desert. There are no fences or anything. You can go. Just wear lots of sunscreen.
Yeah. Ooh. I think I would cook in that sun.
Probably. I think most people do.
I can totally understand.
Well, Don and I are both Canadians of Scottish descent, so we would more than cook in that sun.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I go up like an old school vampire.
You don't sparkle?
No, that's why I said old school.
Okay.
Oh.
Wow, no CGI for you. Okay.
So that's interesting, talking about meeting people. Do you find that that's better for the job than having an agent, or could you do both, or do you think an agent would be better?
An agent would be more ideal because having an agent talk to the studios on your behalf would make such a big difference instead of you cold calling the studios like what I have been doing. Because on one end, networking with friends is good, and they would be able to recommend you to studios, but an agent has that more formal approach of having, like, tried and true tested talent that they could recommend to casting directors.
Right.
So, what are your goals? Like, what's your ambitions in the voice acting industry? Obviously, bigger and better roles, but do you have anything specific?
Let's see. I do know getting an agent is one big one. You can't rush that because I do know that, well, you only have one first impression after all.
Right. But there's more than one agent.
Oh, you're right. Only one first impression per agent.
Per agent, exactly. Or per agent assistant.
For agent assistants, yes. Let's see. Man, there's so many different projects out there I would love to work on. Like, man, oh man, wouldn't everybody want to work on a feature film for Disney or Pixar?
Of course.
Maybe. I've heard mixed things about working for, like, Disney.
Oh, right. But I still...
It depends which branch. Disney TV is pretty good. Disney and TV animation, I mean, is pretty good. It's the film side of things that can be a little tricky.
Demanding.
I see.
Yeah.
Demanding would be the correct word, yes.
Let's see. Other things. Right now it's kind of like I really want to be in some kind of JRPG because, I mean, that's what got me into playing more video games was because of Pokemon. Technically, Pokemon's a JRPG. Then you have stuff like, oh, look, Skies of Arcadia. There's hardly any voice acting in that, but I want to be in a JRPG. I want to be... It's a... Man, a lot of JRPGs I play don't have much voice acting. Golden Sun, but
Right.
But it would be nice to be like, man, I'm trying to think of examples of JRPGs with voice acting. I know the Tales series has voice acting, and those are pretty good. I've auditioned for one of them, but fingers crossed that someday they call me in to audition for another one, you know? Let's see.
JRPGs almost a dying breed? I heard they're not really making so many anymore.
Well, that's a funny one that now that you think about it, because people say that they're a dying breed, but people are still lining up to play Persona 5 and the next Final Fantasy game.
That's true. I'd heard that since the consoles aren't doing as well as they used to, that a lot of the companies just aren't producing them so much anymore.
They are a bit of a risk, though we can just... How do we say this? That there is a niche for everything. As long as you play to that niche and form a game based on the budget, based on that niche, you can be successful. Kind of like how the Disgaea series seems to be going on for such a long time, because they seem to have that tactical RPG angle figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I would love to be in a Bioshock game, though. I think that trilogy is figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for now, until they do the reboot.
Oh,
or the movie.
Ooh.
Actually, you brought up the word niche, and I think that's an interesting word. So, would there be benefit for you for focusing on like a particular niche for voice acting? Is that a good thing or a bad thing to have like a niche where you're kind of like one of the experts or you specialize in?
Well, to start out with, if that's actually a good thing to have a niche or a typecast, so to speak, because when you first start out, you think you're good at everything. The problem is the casting director doesn't know what you specialize at, because it's kind of like picking people for a football team. You want to pick specialists for specialized roles. So, for instance, if the casting director knows that, okay, you're good for tomboys, I'm going to cast you for tomboys, there's going to be plenty of tomboys out there to cast for. Think of all the people who are being typecast for the ingenue, for instance, or the very sprightly, energized, happy-go-lucky hero dude. And that's why you hear the same voice actors over and over, because they specialize. Not to say that you can't do more things, but it's sort of like there's a reason why Johnny Young Bosch at first was known for the happy, plucky lead, but then suddenly, for some reason, he's also known for playing the more devious types, like villains, like Isaiah, or, spoiler alert, someone from Persona 4. So, and it's kind of like you kind of work at it for a while. Like, when I started voice acting, I realized that most people were casting me because I have this vocal fry quality to my voice that lends really well to like tomboys or people who just take charge, sound more earthy. And after a while of being typecast for that, I decided to broaden my range into what else can I use this voice for. I realized that a lot of the time it's the acting that sells your voice. So I realized I can also sound like a lot of older women that they don't usually have a lot of in the amateur community. So I practiced that, and that's why I'm in several indie games as an older lady, because they don't have enough older ladies recording, apparently.
Right.
So there's that, and you just keep working at it.
That's quite a niche. Okay.
Now, do you ever get scared of becoming like, say, what's the feller's name? Is it Richard Cullen that did Optimus Prime, where you get so well known as a role? Peter Cullen, yeah. That anytime you speak, people only think of that one character. Is that something you worry about?
Sometimes, but I will say that 70 to 80% of the time, everyone's cast for their natural voice. So you can't really help it. Though I've heard that Bill Farmer, the voice of Goofy, has to deal with people always being all like, I don't know, he's Goofy though. So, but then again, you have Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario, also voicing for Parthenax in Skyrim. So you never know. You just have to keep working at it.
Right. Well, okay. I guess that's only an issue if you become really, really famous for one particular voice, and like
like poor Nolan North. Oh look, it's Nathan Drake again. Oh look, it's Troy Baker. He's Booker DeWitt everywhere. He's also Joel from Last of Us.
Yep.
But does that make that easier to get jobs? Or
there are pros and cons for everything. Like, if you get really well known, then it's kind of like, oh, cool, you basically have that niche. You will get jobs. Then you have the whole, like, feast famine aspect of, oh, wait, you're oversaturated. Crap! No, don't oversaturate me! If I get used too much, they won't give me jobs for several years because they're afraid of overusing me.
So, have you actually gone to any conventions? Like, I mean, have you been invited as a voice actress to different conventions?
To a few of them, yeah. I did get invited to a few My Little Pony conventions because at the time I was the voice of Rarity in the Fighting is Magic game, which is basically like a parody game based on the series, but it was too good. Hasbro had to defend their brand, so they had to give it a cease and desist. So there's that.
Right.
But joke's on them. Now I work for Hasbro on occasion as the voice match for Rarity for a few licensed games, but that aside, let's see. I have been invited to a few anime conventions because of my work on Skullgirls, and one furry convention because of my work on Dust and Elysian Tale for Fidget.
Huh. So at the furry convention, were the people in the audience actually wearing costumes?
Yes, and they were so much fun to be with because it's sort of like I can just meow and they will meow back.
Wow.
They were a lot of fun to be with.
Right. So is there actually a lot of demand for voice actors? Like, I mean, for people to come to voice acting panels and things like that?
I think so. Because I do know that there is something like another aspect to voice acting, which is working the convention circuit, because when you can't network in person, the least you can do is network with other talents at the conventions themselves. So,
makes sense.
Yeah, which is how I was able to audition for one studio for one project, because we were able to do a performance live reading together, and he heard what I was able to contribute, and then he kept me in mind.
Well, so they actually have you do like live readings at the conventions?
Whatever the panel asks for. So it's sort of like, I do know that one of my friends likes doing the live readings because that gives the actors the ability to do what they are known for doing, acting. And then, I mean, lots of people like to see a demonstration of our skills. And
right.
That's usually the fun ones aside from just doing questions and answers.
Right. Now, have you ever been tempted to actually like cosplay as one of your characters at a convention?
I've been tempted. At the same time, it's kind of like, it's hard to cosplay as Fidget because she's a tiny little Nimbat. But maybe one day I'll try to figure out to do a closet cosplay, or kind of like a more stylized, humanized version of Fidget. Though, for Misfortune, it might be kind of tricky because she only has that little top that barely, sometimes gives the underboob based on, I don't know, how the laundry is feeling that day for her. And her pants that are ripped up that kind of defy gravity now that I think about it, because it's just hanging off her legs.
Right.
Let's see. It's really tempting because some of them have really cool outfits. I would just have to sit down and go, you know what? Yeah, I want to cosplay as Ven. Ven looks cool. She makes swords float in the air. I will have to be creative with that one, but I think it's possible.
Wires.
Magnets.
Yes. Ooh, and they'll bounce up and down as you walk too, so they look like they're doing that cool hovering effect.
Or you could get drones. You could get little drones and have them set to follow you around, and they're like have little cosplay swords on them or something.
Whoa, that sounds really cool. And I'll be all like, yes, I am Ven. Check out my swords. They float. Woo.
Exactly. Well, you can get drones that actually are set. They'll actually follow your phone around. So you tell them where to be in relation to you in the air, and you just walk around and they follow you. It's usually used for like the following camera effect, but you could do it for that too.
Huh.
That is so cool. I didn't know that. Technology.
Yeah, technology is awesome.
And creepy.
At the same time.
Yep. Those things often go together, I notice.
Yes, they do.
So that's it when you're talking about getting gigs. Is there a lot of competition amongst voice actors?
Oh yeah, every single audition, even though there are some times where casting directors would go for tiny pools as possible because they just want to narrow it down to the very, very best top picks that they can get. There have been some auditions, like, I haven't participated in an audition for, like, say, Korra, for instance, but I heard that they had to go through thousands of auditions for that one. Thousands. Wow. And they only had so much time to listen to everybody. Because everybody wants to work on something, on a animated series for Nickelodeon.
Right, yeah. Of course.
Now, are those like actual like voice actors, or is it do you get a lot of people like walk-ins and folks that just see the ad and think, "I give this a try"?
Maybe not too many walk-ins because they try to keep these very confidential. Because if it was public, then you'd have way more than 1,000 people trying out if they wanted to be in Korra. But the thing is that there are a lot of different kinds of actors who are called in to audition for certain series too. Like you might notice this in more recent animated series. They like to have comedians audition too because they have a better sense of comedic timing. They like to have camera actors, because lots of casting directors like to immerse themselves in all kinds of different kinds of media. Yeah. And they like to think to themselves, yeah, I like to hear that person on a mic. Let's see how they act as a voice actor. And you have a lot of on-camera actors, comedians, and basically lots of different performers auditioning.
Right.
And stage actors, don't forget that.
And stage actors, of course. Lots of Broadway actors for animated features for Disney, for instance, because they need all those singers.
Right. Well, Nathan Lane can't do everything.
That is true.
Okay, maybe he can, but he shouldn't do everything.
Although that would be funny. I'd like to see his take on Garfield the cat.
Oh. Mondays. Bring over that bug lasagna, Pumbaa.
Oh, wow. Okay. That would be... So, Kimlin, tell us, what don't people understand about voice acting? Is there something that, like, an idea that people have about voice acting that really kind of bugs you or that you really want to clear up?
Because there are a lot of misconceptions. Let's see. Because it's sort of like, I do know the most recent misconception I've heard that several voice actors were talking about just this week was about what they think acting was. Because there were some challenges I had to overcome because of my own misconceptions about voice acting when I started out. Such as acting was only for, basically acting was more involved, really tense, an exertion. When really sometimes acting is just a matter of like who you are as a person. How sincere you are as a character. It's because it's sort of like you are much more believable when you've been upset in person rather than you work yourself up to that moment of being upset. Some people think, oh, acting is just being method, doing things in real life, and then it'll just translate to the performance. And while method is a process, but the point to method is internalizing these experiences as opposed to like getting your head chopped off in the booth.
I can see that.
Yeah, I think maybe some of that comes from like Rob and myself are both old, and I remember back in say like the 70s, even into the 80s, for a lot of voice acting for animation, even the feature, like TV especially, but the features, it wasn't acting so much, it was mugging for the camera.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's happened in the last few years is that idea that people are starting to think of it more as acting because, like you say, there's more of a sincerity to it. There's more of an actual expression of character rather than, just say the catchphrase and make a funny noise and let's go out and drink.
Oh, the Krusty the Clown approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because it's sort of like when you hear less experienced actors come in, sometimes they kind of forget that it comes from a very genuine, sincere place that makes them who they are, what makes their performances and their choices unique, that make them stand apart from everyone else who has the same voice as them. Other misconceptions is that people think it's just a matter of reading into the mic. And sure, we do have the script in front of us, but again, we have to be able to bring those words to life. And bringing the words to life isn't just like, hello, I will make things sound very announcery, even though there are things that call for announcery things out there. It's kind of like coming from the place that lots of ad campaigns, for instance, at the moment, they're going for a more natural feel to them. Like you are a person next door, someone who isn't selling to them, none of that hard sell stuff. And it's kind of like while there are people out there where voice acting comes easy to them, it doesn't come easy to everybody. That's like saying, oh, you know what? I am now kind of like I'm now Angelina Jolie. I am in all the things. How do I become famous like Angelina Jolie? You need to liquidize your assets and buy nothing but Powerball tickets. You can't do that. It's not that easy. So it's kind of like, so people think it's easy to become a voice actor. Not to say, and it's kind of like it's one of those things where, yeah, the process is easy enough, but mastery, though, that's the hard part.
Right. So then what advice do you have for people who want to become voice actors?
Let's see. There are all kinds of different ways to go about it. I know that to work on your enunciation, try to read aloud as much as you can. Someone told me that reading something aloud for 5 minutes a day gives you a head up over everybody else out there. And the more you read per day, the better. Let's see. And if you can act, the way to go about it is kind of like the better. It's sort of like, instead of just reading to yourself, even better would be like reading and reacting off of other people. Like when you're reading a script, try to really listen to what you're reacting to so you're not just acting in a vacuum. I do know that other things is sort of like, try to think of your voice acting as music, because for instance, when you ride the Haunted Mansion, try to pay attention to how much Paul Frees is like really giving personality and physicality to each of the words. Like when you hear whisper, the way that he just hushes down to make you listen to him very intently. And the way when you hear the word echo, how he makes his voice boom out. Basically, think of like onomatopoeia or personifying these words. Because it's sort of like, that's how I practice a lot of script reading or for public speaking when I was in college, was because I had to pay attention to what these different words meant, what their connotations were, all these different nuances that these words can do. Basically, you're painting with your voice. What all these different words can mean. So all these wonderful words that writers can appreciate, we have to figure out what these writers are trying to do with these words. And the hardest part of all is that when the writers have to write subtext, which is usually stuff that's not written at all, we have to figure out the stuff that's not even written. That's the hard part for voice acting. But if you are able to add that kind of like that extra layer of acting by understanding the subtext of what the writer is writing down, that adds so much more to your performance.
I can see that. Actually, that brings a question to mind then. Do you ever like look at a script and think, "Oh God, no"? Like that just the way it's written or something makes you actually just hate the writer? It's too difficult.
Let's see. I do know that when I was practicing commercials, for instance, I was just like, oh my gosh, look at all these numbers and fractions I have to read, all these scientific words. How am I going to read all of these and make it sound interesting? But then again, that was also like a creative challenge, is sort of like, how do I make this interesting for the listener? How am I supposed to make these ideas come across that, okay, these are different shades of blue. Do I make each of these different shades of blue interesting? And to sort of like, from my inner actor is like, okay, this is a unique challenge. I have to make this work. So that part of it doesn't make it so bad. Though I will say there have been times where certain scripts scare me because it's like, okay, the script makes no sense. I have to make this work. Yeah. Right. It's like pretending you're on one of those reality TV shows for cooking, and you're just like, you're given these ingredients, make a meal out of it, and you're just like, oh, okay, I have to make it work. You can't just give up. You're getting paid for this. Do your best. So, yeah, it's stuff like that. There are some scripts that made me go, the script makes no sense. How is this supposed to be funny? This is a comedic script, but nothing, what is this? This not, no. And I had to go like, okay, if I'm the character, I have to make sense for the character. What kind of archetype is my character supposed to embody? She's a little nutsy cuckoo. Okay, so she's often in her own world, so she feels a bit more distant from the rest of the cast. Good. How does she react to everyone? How does she draw other people into this world? Or is it a matter of her world leaking out to everyone? Stuff like that. Creative challenges that you have to figure out. So there have been scripts that scare me, but at the same time, I still have to engage with it in a professional manner.
Yep. You're being paid, so you gotta just do it the way they want.
Yeah.
That's interesting when you talk about, when you were describing, like, painting a picture with your voice. I've heard musicians, especially from, like, I'm a big fan of the power metal, who are like the guys who combine like classical and metal. And a lot of them talk like that too, that when they do their singing and the way you present it, that it is. I've heard like that exact phrase used before. And I'm wondering, do you ever look at things like singing and how that works? Does that ever play a part?
Aside from the technical aspects, like understanding your head voice, your chest voice, and basically your armature and so on, let's see. I did think about it all the time because it's sort of like different when you read certain words and certain questions. It's sort of like it's kind of like the exercise of like which word should I emphasize that will send which message across. And it's sort of like sometimes when I was like practicing for commercials, I have to realize that I have to have a more positive feel to these words. I have to have a more something that ends up at the end of the sentence, for instance, instead of just making it straightforward. And there's so much music to all this, and it makes me very curious because it reminds me of what my brother tells me when he's studying music, that sometimes there's some words or some songs that end on a very a note that's very inconclusive, something that is like unsolved, and that adds a little bit of mystery to this song. And it's sort of like, okay, something like that could be applied to voice acting. How can we read this that kind of leaves something left to the audience to think about?
That is a very professional attitude, Kimlin.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the way you break that down and the way you think about it, I think that's one of the reasons why you've been so successful so far. You really are working to master your craft.
Oh, shucks, and I'm still learning.
Well, we're all still learning. We're all learning until we're dead. Those are your options. You're either learning or you're dead.
Oh, no!
I mean, you can quit, in theory, but you might as well be dead at that point.
Yeah.
Speaking about artists in general, not specifically you, of course. But no, I'm truly impressed with your knowledge of your craft. I think you clearly studied very, very hard. And I think that it really shows, and I think it's really paid off.
Aw, thank you. I'm like Twitter pated.
Don, did you have any other questions?
Questions, no, but I would like to say that it's voice actors are part of the process for animation, and that I don't think a lot of people consider, and it's not it's because it's not the flashy part. Like, people know the animators, they know the designers, some of the directors, and it's interesting because as you said and as you've pointed out, there's a lot of theory and there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of practice and technique and effort that goes into it. And it's kind of this secret, mysterious part of the process that, I don't think people realize just how much work has to go into, even if you're doing just some like wacky voice of the cartoon sidekick. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of knowledge. And it's nice to have you on the show to kind of elucidate some of that for the audience.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on that note, I think that's a perfect spot to bring this to a close. So yes, thank you for coming on, Kimlin. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and visit us at the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid we're going to have to wipe your memory after this for
Oh, no!
it's security purposes, but you understand.
Yeah, okay.
But hopefully our listeners will definitely remember what you've brought to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on that note, thank you everyone for listening. And please tune in next time when we'll talk about something completely and totally awesome. Not as awesome as Kimlin, but something that's almost as awesome anyway. That's not the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Ah.
Good night, folks. Bye. Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to hear more or join the conversation, come visit us at obeythedna.com. You can also find us on iTunes or whatever fine podcast site forgot to lock their back door. So until next time, remember that to master the nerdly arts takes time, practice, and enough Coca-Cola to drop a rhino. See ya! come on over and join the conversation at obeythedna.com, where you will find show notes and more.